Welcome back. So now we're going to the part 2 of our implementation, which is to create the infrastructure to query our REST API from the RESTCountries API. So in that RESTCountries API, we need to query some data, which is to get our country code, the name, the dial code, and their flags. So when we go to our browser here, we check the RESTCountries API. Okay, restcountries.com. So this is their documentation. So here we're going to query the all, but we're going to narrow down name to the name, the code, they call the list of the code. Now you have the dial code, list of code, the currency, the calling code. This is the one we're interested in, and you see the calling code are in the IDD object, so that's where we'll find the calling code. We don't need all this other information here. So, and in the name, they have their they have name, searching the country by name or by code or by their full name. So what we need is to get the name by the code, which is, we are going to use this first one because you see there are a lot of them here. That's it. So let's go back to Android Studio and create this. So we can make this full screen, right? So now, first of all, we are going to build this from the ground up. That is from our database to our mapper, our repositories, then get up to our UI. Okay, so to create our database, we go to our models and add our remote model, which is we're going to call it's going to be a data class, and we'll call that our country. So in this country, instead of creating too many files, we'll nest both our DTO and our mapper inside this singular file. So, but first of all, let's get our data object. So we call at serializable, and here, first of all, we have the var called code, and this code is going to be a string, and that string, after that, we have a var called name, and is also going to be a string. And after that, we have a var we're going to call the dial code. So the dial code, and this is also going to be an int. Then, not char, var. So var flag URL, because we need this to show their flag as well with their dial code, and that's going to be a nullable string because sometimes it might not be available. All right, so these are our country data class. So we now need our DTO, a minimal DTO that we can use to pass the RESTCountries response that we're going to receive from the API endpoint. So here we call it RESTCountries DTO, like this. So that is also going to have some variable call name. So are going to be the way they are some of these things we're assessing are on that API. So here, this is going to do that shortly, so don't mind the error. Var IDD, like I showed you briefly, type. So that's equal, that could be null, and var, we have the flags, so that's how they registered it on that API. So that could be nullable as well. So we'll create all those data class individually, then import them. Here we'll have the var, which is the country code again, which is the C2 CCA2, like this. So, and that's going to be a string, and that could be null as well. So that's it. So now we can create all these individual data classes the way we're going to get them from the API. So first we start with the name. As serializable, we've got data class called name. So that name is going to have a variable which is the common name of the country, and that will be a nullable string, and we can assign that to null immediately, and that's done. So the next one is as serializable. We have the data class we're going to call IDD, and the IDD is going to have two variables. One is the root, so the root, and that root is also a nullable string, and we can assign that to null. then this is going to, the root is going to be the +1 plus whatever the country starts with as their dial code. Then we have so many suffixes from the API, but we just need one, and we call that suffixes, and that is a list of strings. Okay, so, and it's also nullable, but we assign that to an empty list because that's what we expect to come back, a list. So this is our IDD. Then the last is the flags. So our serializable data class, we call that flags, right? So that flag is going to have some variable as well. The first, we have the flag comes in two formats, which is PNG, and that PNG is a string, and it's a nullable string, and we'll assign that to null in case nothing comes back. Then we have SVG, and it's also another nullable string, and we can assign that to null as well. So finally we can have an alternate, so which is serial, we can call serial name, and we call that auth. So auth val, we call it auth, and it's of type string, and you can assign that to null. So this is supposed to, so this is the serial name. Sorry, that's my bad, I am typing the wrong thing, and that's it. So this is fine now. So we have finished up with our data class, and this is supposed to be null, small letter. So now let's create our mapper down here so that everything will be together instead of creating individual classes or files for them. So here we have a function that we can call RESTCountries DTO dot to country or null. So this function here is going to map our country, the data from our country, to match the data class that we have defined above, like this, because this is not exactly how it's going to come from the API. So that's why we need this mapper here. So here we call val display name, and that display name we assign that to name dot common name, which is what we're interested in, dot take if, we'll pass it dot is not blank. Then we use else operator to say else return null if nothing is there, if there is no common name for that particular country. Then we create another variable that we will call code2. So this code2 is that CAA code, the country code, CAA, dot take if. So we pass it dot is not blank again, and we can also have it to return null in case there's nothing there. So now we'll build, if there is exactly one empty surface, we should use the root plus the surface. So that means if there is exactly one empty for here, we should just use the root, which is the dial code and the surface. But if not, if there are multiple surfaces or none, we prefer to just use the root, which is just plus. So if the country doesn't have a dial code registered on this API, because you don't know how often this API is updated and if it's comprehensive, so we should just, so that we don't return an empty column. So now to do that, we say val root equal to IDD, which is nullable dot root, and also nullable dot take if. Then we'll pass it dot start with. So whatever the code is, it should start with plus, then or it should return to us +0. Okay, like this. So now down here we'll now call val, which we're going to call dial test, which is our dial test that is supposed to be returned to our UI. When we use the when statement and say when IDD, which is nullable dot suffixes, and also nullable dot size is equal to 1, and we say that when IDD dot suffixes dot first or null, so which it could be nullable dot is not blank, then we should assign that to true, like this. So then we send that to, we return root plus idd.suffixes dot first. So when it's multiple, we'll just return the first one with the root, which is the plus. Then or else we should just return the root. Okay, like this. All right. So after that, we say var, which is our dial int, is equal to dial test, which you've just created a condition above, dot filter. So now it dot is digit, like this, dot to int or null, or we can now return null. Okay, then at the end of it, or when all these conditions have been met, we say return country, and now the name of our country, the name we want to return for our country is going to be the display name, and the dial code is going to be our dial int, which is the filtered suffixes and the root. Then the code I want to return here is the CCA2, and finally the flag URL we want to return is going to be our flags, which is nullable.png, or we return the flags.svg. So if we have one, we'll return the first one. If we have one, we'll just return whichever one is available, either the PNG or the SVG. I hope you get that. That makes sense. So, but what I'm supposed to pass here is code 2, not the CCA2. So code 2 like this. So that's it. So right now, this is our country data class completed with our mapper and all that. So now the next thing we can create now is to create the interface that is going to call that API endpoint. So now we go to let's create another package here. Let's add another package in our data package that we're going to call remote, just to show where the data is coming from. Then in that remote package, let's add our RESTCountries API interface. So it's going to be RESTCountries API, like this. So in that RESTCountries API, we'll filter to only the fields that we need so that we can have a lighter payload, because in that API there are a lot of fields, but we don't need them all. So to do that, we say at get. Yes, I think we've not added the right dependency for our retrofits. Let's check that out. Yes, that's true. There's no retrofits dependency here, and we can access that just now. So what we'll do is to get that, and once we get that, I believe we'll be able to access the get response. So now I have it somewhere, and I'm going to copy it and get back to you. So I will paste the retrofit dependency under here like this. Then we'll sync our project and see if we can access that get. Okay, our project has finished the sync process. So now let's check if we can get we can import that get. So now we have access to our retrofit. So let's continue. So now we say get. Then we pass the endpoint, which is the version 3.1, and we pass the all. So, we pass the all, but we're going to filter it down to the fields that we're interested in. So here we'll call a suspend function, and we call the get all. But inside that, we should now add at query to query the fields that we're interested in. So we pass fields here, and in that fields we say fields, then we pass our string. Then inside assign the string, we'll have that list of name, which is what we're interested in, idd, flags, and CCA2, like this. So these are the fields that we want to return from the payload. Then here, this is going to be the list of those fields and we pass our RESTCountries DTO like this. So with that, we can just query these 4 fields that we want from the payload. Let's optimize this. So that's done now. So now the next thing we need to do to fully access this API endpoint is to go to our DI. So in our DI, we'll call the OKTP. In our DI here, we'll call the OKTP client here. So we use single as usual, and we inside the thing we call the OK HTTP. This one down here, client.builder like this. Then dot connect timeout in case it's taking too long. Let's add 30. Then we say timeout in seconds. Time unit dot seconds. It's supposed to be time unit like this. Dot seconds like this. Okay, so the connect timeout is 30. We can also add the read timeout there. So we say read timeout and we pass 30 again, and it's still timeout, time unit in seconds, dot seconds like this. And we can also add the write timeout to 30. So in case we decide to write, but okay, time unit dot seconds like this, then we can now call our build. So after that, we can now call our retrofit build as well. Single, and here we say retrofit. Need to import that dot builder like this. So do that. So now we add our base URL. This base URL is simply the RESTCountries base URL, which we can actually get from the website. So for this all, that's the base URL we need for this all, which is we have already added this to our RESTCountries API. So what we need is from here. Then we'll copy that, then close that up. We just add that here. So with this and with this value here, we now get access to the RESTCountries API. And if we want to visualize this and see some of these fields, the way we'll access them here, paste that here, add this, and add fields and assign fields. So let's say we are looking for the name, country's name. You see how the data comes up. So if I have JSON formatter now, I don't have JSON formatter here, it will show you some of the fields properly. So you see the official, this is what the official name is. This is the common name of Chile, and this is the official name. So here you have name, you have common name, Benin, official name, Republic of Benin. So that's how it's formatted on this API endpoint, as you can see. But unfortunately, I don't have a JSON formatter. So we move on. All right. So I hope you get the point. So with that, the next thing is now, because we're just querying this database, we need to get the client, and the client I will just call get here like this. So now the next thing is to add our converter factory. So converter factory, then we pass our JSON converter. So do we have that in the JSON converter here? No, we don't. So we have our retrofit converter here. So why is this not pulling? Oh, it's finally here. Sorry, I think I was a little bit impatient there. So we can import that now, and that is it. So now we can just call .create, and we are fine with our factory. Then last but not the least, we call our build. So with this now, we have access to our API endpoint. So the next thing we can do now is to add this to our repositories and create the functions that we query this, the way we process the data in our repository implementation. So let's get to that. I think we can close all this down. So now what we'll do is we'll go to our domain. We can create countries repository instead of packing everything in our customer repository, because we might need this again in case we are working on the cards in order for them to select the country where they are paying from, so that we can also update all that details. So here we're going to call this an interface, and we'll call it the country repository. So in the country repository, we're going to have just one suspend function, which is the fetch countries, and that fetch countries is going to return a list of country like this. Then this can now access our country data class like this. So now, because this is lightweight and this is possibly going to be the last thing we do with the countries API, we can just add the implementation down here as well. So let's create the class. We'll call that class here, country repository implementation. And in the body, we're going to have a private var that we'll call our API, and that API is from our RESTCountries API here. Then in the body here, we're going to first of all inherit from our repository. So that is our country repository like this. So now we are forced to implement this function. But before we do that, let's add a flow here so that we can read the loading and the error states of our implementation in our UI. So let's add a flow here, and that flow, coroutine flow. Then let's call our request state here like this, and we need this here. Okay, so now let's implement that in our implementation. Can cut this out. So here, now that we can assign this to a coroutine flow so that we can emit the error and the loading states. Okay, so here we can use a try catch here, and in the catch we can use our get all our exceptions, and in those exceptions we can emit our request state dot error, and we can just pass a simple message that says cannot access the API endpoint, and we pass our e.message like this, or we can return unknown error like this. In the body, we are going to emit our request state dot loading like this when we are making the connection. So here we're going to create a variable that we'll call countries, and we'll assign that with context like this. Then we pass our dispatchers.io like this. Then under that, we can now call our API.get all. Then we'll say .map not null. Then we'll pass it dot to country or null. Then we also set it to be distinct by the country code, and also to be sorted by it dot the name of the country. So why then after that, okay, we're supposed to put this in a lambda like this and cut this, undo that, get everything, cut this, paste this here. Then after that, we can now emit our request state dot success. Then we can now pass the countries that were returned as the data. So with this, our implementation is a bit tight. We can now track what's going on in case things don't work out as we expect them to. So that's done now. So the next thing we can do, now that we are finished with our repositories and our implementation, we can rightly move on to adding this up to our flow in the customer repository. So if we go to our models here, we check our customer data class. We need to add, we have the postal code, we have the phone number, we have the address. So we need to add the country as well. So now we have a variable that we're going to call country from our country, and this could be also nullable, and we can assign that to null, add our comma here. So with that, we can now go to our implementation, our customer repository implementation, and do some tidying up. So our customer repository implementation, which is this one. So in our read customer flow, we're going to add to map our countries, because the country is going to come as a map, because it's going to have the name, the code, and the dial code, and also the flag URL for the country. So we need to create a variable here that we will call country map. So that we'll call country map, and we'll assign that to our document snapshots.get. We pass our country string here, right, as a map. So in the key value pair, we're going to add asterisk here, we'll add any. So let's make this capital and take, yeah, so that's happy now. So now we create a variable called country, and we assign it to our country map, nullable country map dot let. So here we can give it a name as map. Then in the body we can now create our variables, which is the name equal to map. Then we pass our name string as a string here. Right, so here we can create the code as well, then map, then we pass our code string as also a string. So after that, the next one is the dial code, and we'll assign that to our map. So here we're going to actually cast it to int. So we say map, then we pass our string, the dial code, as long, because the dial code is going to come from database, from Firebase as long, then dot to int, like this. So the last one is our variable for the flag URL, and we'll assign that to our map and pass our flag URL like this as a string. Then now that we've created all those variables, we'll set this condition and say if name is not null and code is not null and dial code is also not null, and the last one is flag URL is not null, then we call our country, and in our country we're going to pass the name as the name that we obtained and our code as the code, then our dial code also as the dial code, and our flag URL as the flag URL, else then we can return null. Okay, if none of them are true, if they are null, then we should just return null for the country. But some countries might not have flag, so we can also decide to exempt that, but that's still fine, it will still work. Okay, so now down here we're going to add, we have our phone number, we have our address, we have our postal code, we have our city. So the next thing we need to add here is our country, like this, and pass our country that we've just created above, and that should be fine to read our customer flow like that. So the next thing is we need to also update our country. If the user selects a country, then we come to the update customer down here, and we also create the map again like we did before. So now we can add that variable country map here, and we say customer dot country dot let, and the map we say map of, and in that map we say name, string name to it.name, then string code to it.code, then our string dial code, I think that's the next one, to it.dial code, like this, and finally our flag URL to it.flag URL, like this. Okay, so I think that's what we need, how we need to map our country once it's returned. So lastly here we're going to add that string called country and to country map. Okay, so with that, that's our update here done. So now we have finished all this and everything looks, there's no error, only some warnings, which is the word unknown says typo. Oh, my bad. Thank you for reminding me of that. So unused import directive, we optimize that. Then our implementation is squiggly clean, no warnings. All right, that's done now. So the next thing we can look into is now pushing this implementation further into, first of all, our profile form. Then, okay, let's get it into our view model first of all before we start working with the UI the way it should be. So let's go to profile view model here. So in this view model we're going to introduce our country before, because we haven't added that yet. So in our address here we create a var that we're going to call country for the state, and that will be this, and we can assign that to null. Okay, So that's our profile state captured, right? So the next thing is we can capture the state of our countries. So let's do that. Here we say var country state by mutable state of, then we'll pass the type, we pass the type, our request state, and we pass the list of our countries. Okay, and inside here we're going to pass our request state dot loading, because we're not caching the data we get from this API locally in our app, because that will be we're going lightweight. So this could be your own assignment to see how you can make this to catch the countries locally, so that you can have offline feature as well. So but right now we're going to proceed without that feature. Okay, so here we create another var, and we private var, we'll call it countries, and we're going to return a list of country like this, then assign that to an empty list. Okay, so now we've created these two variables. The next thing we need to do is to create a private function that we're going to use to load the countries. So just like we've done here, let's add a private suspend function, and we call it load countries, right? So this load countries will have no parameter. Then in the body, we'll call the country state that we've just created above, and we'll set our request state dot loading like this. Then down below, we'll use a try catch, and in that try, we say countries, and we assign that to our country repository, which we have not called here. So we go up here, we add our repository, private var country like this. So now we can access that here and say country repositories dot fetch countries. That's the function we have in our repository. Then countries state, and we'll assign that to our request state dot success like this. Then we'll pass our countries that we've just created up here. So why is this complaining? So we're having this error here because you remember that in our repo implementation here, in our countries implementation, no repo implementation, in our countries repository implementation here, we used a flow here. So we're returning a flow here. So in our view model, we might not necessarily need a try catch here. So we can just assign this using a view model scope dot launch. And inside the launch, we're going to, since we have created our variables for our country states and the list of countries here, we can just, I'm traveling too far. So here we can just call country repository dot fetch countries like this. Then we pass on start, and in the on start we'll call country states that we've created above equal to, we assign that to request state dot loading. So, and also we can also collect, and in that collect our country states, yeah, this one, and we'll assign that, we pass we'll give it a name here that we'll call states like this. Then we call country states like this, and we'll assign the state like this. So then we say if state is request state dot success, because we're catching the success, the state in our implementation. So here in the body we say countries, and we'll assign that to state dot data like this. So then further down we'll say screen state dot phone number dot our dial code dot let. So here we can give the name dial here and say state dot data dot first or null. Then we can now pass in the lambda it dot dial code, and we can now, that will be equal to the dial that we've created above, and we'll say let, and you can also give this a name to call it a match for the dial code for the country we selected. Then screen state is equal to screen state dot copy. So here the ID is going to be the country, and then we assign that to match. Okay, this is what our implementation will look like. And we remove the suspend function here because that's no longer necessary. So down here we can also use the view model scope.launch and call our load countries like this. Okay, so now is the time to proceed to our UI. So the first thing we need to do is remember in our profile, where is our profile here? So in this component we don't have anything for we don't have any test field for our countries. So, and we have not created our country picker dialog. So let's do that now. Let's start with creating the country picker dialog, which we add as a general component. Where is our components package? So this is our component package here. So we can choose to, because we're going to have another dialog later in this project. So let's add another package that we'll call dialog. We'll have the categories dialog later. So here we'll add a new composable file that we'll call our country picker dialog, like this. Can copy that. Now this is going to be a composable file and we call it composable like this. So that's it. So in the country picker dialog, we're going to have some parameters, and in that parameters, so the first one will be countries, and we'll call that is going to return a list of country like this, and we have selected country, and that's going to be country. Can make that nullable. Then we have on dismiss, and that will be an empty unit, and we also have on confirm click. Let's put that like that. So, and that's going to be a unit with type of country, and we're going to return a unit. So down here in the body, we're going to create our alert dialog. So, and our alert dialog is going to have the text field that is going to display the country name, flag, and their dial code. Okay, so but first of all, let's create the required variables for that. So we say search query, and search query by remember, and here we pass our mutable state of, and that will pass an empty string. So don't forget to import the setters, the set value, and the get value like this. So after that, we select a local, we call that a local selection by remember, and here this is going to be of type selected country that we've created, then mutable state of, then we pass our selected country as well. Then after that, let's create a variable that will filter our countries when the user searches for a particular country. Call it filtered country, that would be a better name. Filtered countries, and we'll assign that to remember, and that remember is going to have two variables, which is the search query and the countries variable. So then inside here in the body, we're going to create a variable that we will call query, and that query is going to be search query dot trim, because there are spaces at the end of their type in the lowercase, and if it's lowercase, then if they are searching with a caps in uppercase, then you can change it to lowercase. So if query dot is empty, then countries, else we return countries, but else we should return countries dot filter, and in that filter we can give it a name, country, and in the body here we say country. We're going to filter by the country name dot lowercase dot contains the query that was entered, or we can say plus, because we want to give them the option to search with the country dial code. So they say country dot dial code like this dot contains, we'll pass the query again. If they are searching with the dial code, then or country dot code, maybe the country code as well, dot lowercase dot contains, we still pass whatever they have passed. So that's the variable we're going to use to filter whatever search term the user is entering into the search text field. So now let's call our alert dialog, and inside the body we're going to have on dismiss request. Let's set that to on dismiss that we've set above. Then after that we can have the title, and the title here we're going to use a lambda to set a test for the title. Then the test will say select a country like this. So down here we're going to say let's add a font size, and the font size dot extra medium. Then we can say color, and the color will be text primary like this. So that's our test done. Then after that we can now add another test, which is going to be, we'll add a column, because this is the column, the section that will have the flag, the name, and all that. So modifier, you assign that to modifier dot height. Now we'll set the height of our dialog. Let's set this to 360.dp. Then we can set it to also fill the max width like this. So now we can now add our burger test field to display this test down here. So we can call burger test field like this, and inside there we add our value and set the value to the search query. Then on value change we set that to use a lambda and set that to our search query, and we'll assign that to IT like this. So the next thing we need to add here is our placeholder. So our placeholder will say dial code to tell them the options that are available, or country like this. I think that's okay. So now inside that same column, after the text for the search, text field is for our search. So now we are going to return the countries and display them under the search and say, so let's use a spacer to add some gap between them. And modifier, we say modifier dot height, and that height, let's give it like 8.dp. So now after that spacer, we say if filtered countries dot is not empty, we should return a lazy column, which will be list of countries. A lazy column, yeah. So in that lazy column, let's style this lazy column a little bit. So now we call our modifier again, and we set our modifier dot weight, so that the lazy column will take the whole space of whatever space 1f that is remaining. So now we want to set some vertical arrangement, and our arrangement will be, want our arrangement to be spaced by the space by, and want it to be spaced by like 4.dp. We'll check this out by the time we display this to see if that works well, if that looks good at all. So now we use items to display the items that is returned, which is the list of countries. So we call items. So in the items we pass our filtered countries like this, and also the key is going to be it.code like this. So here in the body, we're now going to give it a name and say country like this, and we call our country picker, which we have not created. So we call our country picker. So now in this country picker, we're going to have some, let's create some parameters like country, and we pass our country that we've created above, and also is selected, and we set this to local selection, which could be nullable or code, and we assign and this is equal to the country dot code. And also we can pass on select, and on select we use a lambda to say local selection is assigned to our country that we've created above. So here we can now create this under here, and let's flesh that out. Then we now continue. We will flesh this out, but let's continue since we have created the placeholder for that. So now we can say after the if, we can say else, and we can call our error card if there is no country that is returned. So we set our error card modifier.wait. So the error card should fill the entire space of the dialog picker. So now we can now send our message, and the message will say dial code not found, like this. Okay, so we can continue and set up our alert dialog before we start creating the associated composables like the country picker, and we'll also create a selector as well. So let's finish up with our alert dialog, then move on to the remaining part. So after the test, we can add on confirm, a confirm button. So our confirm button, we use a test button for that, and in the test button we have on click, and on click we use a lambda and call the local selection dot let. Then we can now pass our unconfirmed click like this and a block. So with that, we can now add some colors so that we can style that test. And here we call button default dot text button colors, this one. Then we pass our container color. So if we don't want the container to show like a button, we'll check all that out later. So the container color, we can set the color dot transparent. You need to import color, so transparent like this. And we can also set the content color. The content color is going to be our text brand, which I guess is like brown or yellow. So after that, in the body of that text button, we'll now add a text that will say confirm like this. Let's add some font size to that as well. So font size dot, let's make it regular, I guess, nothing bogus. So font weight, we can make it to be medium so that it will stand out a little bit to show that it's a clickable text. But we'll find out and see if we can change the background a little bit if that doesn't look as nice as we want it. So after that, we can now add our dismiss button, and we use a lambda for that as well, and add another text button. Or we can just copy this text button here and just style it differently, change the text. So here we don't need this, we just say on dismiss like this. Then button colors is the button is still transparent. Then we call test primary and gray that out a little bit because it's a very dangerous button. We don't want the user to use it all the time. We want them to select something so that we can move on. So we can make this alpha half. I need to import alpha again. So that's done. That's okay now. So the text here will say cancel, and the font will still be the same, similar font. Okay, so but it's a little bit grayed out. So now finally we want to set our content color, container color I mean. So the container of our dialog should be our surface light so that it doesn't look awkward. Okay, so that's done. Now for this column, why is it the test? Did I import the wrong test? The test is from the alert dialog, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, test is a composable test. Okay, I think I made a mistake. I'm passing the test 2 times. This is supposed to be title. Sorry about that. So yeah, this is the title, so everything should be fine now. So now let's see another error here, which is from, so I need to change the local selection to a var because we're reassigning it. So what did I make it here? See, all these nuances are very important. So that's how all the errors gone. So now let's create these associative composable files. So here we have our country. Let's put all this in a new line so that it will look neater. So we'll also require, let's add a modifier here as well, and we'll assign that to modifier like this. So that's it. So now we can now move on. So here for the country picker, we are going to create, let's have a quick look at our prototype. In our prototype here, so we're going to let me expand that. We'll create this picker here to select which of them. So the picker needs to be either selected. If it's not selected, it should be grayed out. If it's selected, you should have this color right here. Okay, so down here now we're going to use a row to create the text first of the country picker. So here we're going to call a row, and in that row we need to style the row a little bit. So we call our modifier and we want it to fill the max width, and down here we add clickable to make that clickable, and that clickable we use a lambda and we'll say on select like this. So let's make it a function. Then we can add a padding, and in that padding we add a vertical padding and we set that to like 8.dp like this. Then let's add our vertical alignment again. Our alignment should center vertically like this. So that's our row styling. Then the next thing we need to call our async image. So this async image is going to load the flag. As you can see, we need the flag, we need a test, then we need our selector here, which we'll still create later, but let's start with adding this flag icon here. So now with that async image, we'll call our modifier and we'll assign our modifier to modifier. Then let's set the size. The size is going to be like 24.dp. That's the size of the flag icon, and we want to set a shape, not shadow shape. So no, let's clip it, not shape here. So the shape is going to be a circle shape like this. Then we also call our model. So in our model here, we'll call country.flag URL like this, and we'll add our content description, and we'll pass the country dot name. So it's the name of the country. Then we can pass their flag like this to tell the screen reader the particular country flag that is there. So also we need that color filter. So we add our color filter, and in that we'll call color filter dot colorimetrics. So here we need to create a variable called colorimetrics that will change this color. Like as you can see from here, the one that is grayed out and the one that is not, that shows fully with the country colors and all that. So now let's create that up here. So first of all, we'll create our saturation to determine what level of saturation for each of them, the selected one and the grayed out one. So the saturation is going to be, remember, so here we say we use animatable. So we say if in the initial value, if is selected, then we should return the full scale, the full saturation, else we should return 0 saturation. Okay, so we should return 0 saturation. So we need to import that. So here under that, we now use a launched effect, and we set that to is selected. Then down here we'll call our saturation dot animate to, and we set that condition again and say if is selected, then return 1f, else return 0f. Okay, so now that we've created that, we can capture that state change once a particular country is selected, if it was not selected previously. Then we can now say val colorimetrics is equal to, remember, then we pass our saturation here dot value, or whatever value it is. Then we call the colorimetrics here, and we pass dot apply, and in the body we'll say set to saturation, then we pass our saturation dot value like this. So down here we just call the variable colorimetrics like this. Okay, so that will help us do that swap. So after the async image, let's add another spacer between the flag and the text. So we say modifier dot width or weight. So because in our 1f, so if you check in our component here, the text takes the entire remaining space, but the outer composable is spaced by, I think we set that to 14%. So set that to 12% on each end, but the text will take whatever space is remaining here. Okay, so now so under that we pass our test, and our test is going to say plus we pass country.dialcode, and also in brackets we're going to add the country.name. So because that's what we have here, so the country, the dialcode, and in brackets will pass the name. Okay, so that's it. So let's style this test now, and this test is going to have a font size of regular. Then the color is going to be our text primary, and the max line is going to be 1. Then if we have overflow, let's use text overflow dot ellipsis like this. So then down here, after that, we should now call our selector, but unfortunately we've not created that, and we're going to create that now. So our selector is going to have one single variable that says is selected. We pass is selected here. So we're not importing, we're creating the selector. Create a composable selector, yeah, like that. So under here we have our selector. We can put that in a new line, and we can also add our modifier here, and we'll assign that to modifier. And after that, in the body, we're going to use a box for that circle shape. So in the box, we're going to have a modifier, and assign that to the modifier that we've created above, and set the size to 20.dp. I think that's a reasonable size. .clip, and we set that to circle shape, and also .background. We set that to, we need to create an animated background here. So this circle is actually 24, but we made it 20. So we need to make this background animatable so that it can change to gray or colored when it's selected, just like we have in our prototype. So to make that happen, we'll create another variable again, which we call var, and we call it animated background. So the animated background by animate color state like this, and we'll set our target value, and we'll assign that to say if is selected, we should use surface brand, else we should use surface dark, yeah, like this. So our background is going to now be our animated background like this, and after that we should set our content alignment, and we should set our alignment to center like that. So in the body of our box, we can now use animated visibility to set the icon. That is because, as you can see here, the ones that are not selected don't have that icon, but once selected, the icon shows up. So we're going to make that happen here once again, and we say animated visibility, this one, and in that we add our visible, and we set it to is selected. It can only be visible when it's selected. Then that means we pass our icon down here, and our icon is going to have a modifier, and set our modifier to modifier dot size. Since the box is 20, we can make the size to be 14 so that it will fit in nicely. All right, so down here we're going to have our painter, and our painter is going to be painter resource. We call our resources dot icon dot check mark. So after that, we're going to add our content description. We set that to check mark icon. So after that, we can now add a tint. I think I imported the wrong icon, that's why these things are not coming up. We set that to icon white so that it will be visible. Let's import icon again. Yeah, that's fine now. So now we also need to import the setter here. So we'll need to change this to var actually, and that's totally fine now. So okay, Okay, so we have finished with our country dialog here. Let's optimize these imports to avoid all those warnings. So we are finished implementing that. Now the next thing is to add this to our profile form. Call this up in our profile form. So the next thing we need to create here is to create another component that we'll be needing, and that component is going to be called, I think I created this package in the wrong place. This is the home. This is the component package. So I need to refactor this before we can proceed. Refactor that. Okay, so close this up. This, we're still working on this. Close that up to make this look cleaner. So let's create another package we're going to call our burger select field, because this is going to be slightly different from our burger test field here, which we could have used, because once this is selected, once the country is selected, it's going to come out with the flag, with the country name, not with the dial code this time around. So for us to get the country out with the flag, we need a sync image, which we don't have already in our test field here. So we're going to create another one so that we don't mess with this. All right, so for we to do that, let's add another composable file here, and we'll call that burger select text field to show that it's for the one that is already selected. So here we say composable, and we call our function, and we paste what we copied, and in the body here we add our famous modifier, and that modifier will assign that to modifier. I think I've imported the wrong modifier again, so let's import the UI one. We need to add the body before we can let us do that. All right, so here we can import the modifier, this one, compose UI modifier. Let's move on. Then our test is of the type string, and also we are going to have our icon URL, and that's going to be a string as well, and we can assign that to null. And also on click, we can add that to an empty unit. Then after that, we can add our placeholder, and our placeholder is going to be of type string as well, and we can pass an empty string here. And after that, we can add is error, just so that it matches our burger test field as well. So, and that's going to be a boolean, and we can assign that to false now. So I think I used semicolon here instead of colon. Yeah, so now we're going to use another row again to add that up, and in that row, the row is we're going to start the row and call our modifier here, and we can pass the background. So the background is surface light, and we can add some borders just to look like, so that everything will be uniform. We can add the width of that border, and we can set that to 1.dp, nothing bogus. And after that, we can also add color, and the color can be our border idle, and also the shape can be rounded corner shape, and we pass 6.dp as we did with the text field. So after that, let's clip that again and clip that to our rounded corner shape again. We'll still pass 6.dp so that it will be uniform, and also we make that clickable, and it should be, we should pass our on click here like this. Okay, so then we can add some padding, and we add some vertical and horizontal padding of 16.dp each, and horizontal 16.dp. That's all from our prototype, but I don't want to be going back and forth to the prototype all the time. I hope you understand that, so that we don't take too long in trying to make this program work. So we can center that vertically, and after that, we have to determine if the icon URL is available, if it's passed down from our API before we can now show the flag. But if not, then we can just show the placeholder. So now we say if icon URL is not null, that means we have some data passed. Then we should call our async image, and our async image, the model is going to be our icon URL. Then we can now add a content description, and we call that a country flag. We don't know what country it is yet. So then down here we'll call modifier, and that with the modifier we can set the size of the flag as well from here. So we set the size and we pass 24.dp as we have done before, and after that we want to clip it, not clip bounds, clip. Then we set that to circle shape as well. So after that we want to set our content scale, and we want to set that to content scale.crop, like this. So now we have added our image. Let's add a spacer under that. So we made it 14 before in our prototype. So here we say spacer, and we add our modifier, and we'll assign that to modifier.width, and we'll make that 14.dp. Then after that we can now add a test. So we can add a test here, and the test will be, we'll say test dot is blank, like this. If test is blank, we'll use a lambda to pass. This is if blank, not is blank. So now we can style our font size, going to be font size dot regular. We can set that to our content color. So we have no variable, so let's create the variable our content color. So we need that content color, because we say if text dot is not blank, then we should return text primary, else we should return text primary dot copy. Then we can pass 0.6f, so that it will be a bit gray, so that will show the user that this is a placeholder, that we need something, some inputs there. So now we come down here, we call our content color like this. Okay, so now let's set the max line in case the country name is too long. We still want it to maintain one line. Then if it has overflow, we set text overflow dot ellipsis. Okay, so now that's done. Then we set if, so we set under that, we say if is error, we should set a spacer, and set a spacer height, set 4 dp above, so that it doesn't hit the ceiling of the container. Then we can now add a test, and that test should say invalid selection, in case the user have selected something that is not a country. So then we should set the color of the test to be a red color, to show that something is wrong here. This is not what we're expecting. Okay, so but we need to make that so that it doesn't come out very invasive. Okay, so now we add a font size, and we make the font size to be small, so that it will be just a marker there to show that something else is required. So with that, I think we're good to go with our test field. So what we need to do now is to go back to our profile form, which I know is here. So in our profile form now, we can now add the selectors field that we have created, and I want to add that immediately after the email, because the country comes before the city. So here we're going to call burger selectors field, and inside that we're going to pass our modifier, and in our modifier we're going to set it to fill the max width of the parent. And after that we can add a test, and the test will say country name. So we need to add our country here, which we have not done before. So here we're going to add country variable, and that will be from our country of type country, like this, and that could be nullable. So now we're going to add on value change, which is on country select, so that we can change this selection, and that will be an empty unit like this. So with that, now we can reach our country. Then down here we can now say country.name like this, or if nothing is returned, we can return an empty string, thereby calling our placeholder. Okay, so now after that, we can now add our icon URL, and our icon URL will also say country.flag URL like this. Or we can also add on click, and our on click will be on country select that we've created above. Then our placeholder we just say country. Okay, so that is now we have that's part in our profile form now. But now under here, let's go back and have a look. Remember, in our previous implementation, we created a single text field here that is just where we added just phone number. But here we want to create two text fields, one that will be populated with the country code and flag like this once the country is selected up here, and where the user can now enter their phone number. Okay, so for we to do that, we come down here, we've already created this, so we can come on top of this, we can now add that row, and in that row we'll style the row a little bit, and that row is going to have a modifier, and that modifier, we want the modifier to fill the maximum width of the parent. Then we can call a vertical alignment and set our alignment to center vertically. Then inside the body now, we can now call, because that's the where the dial code and the flag is going to be exactly like with our select text field. So we can copy this and come down here and put that and format that the way it should be. So but here it's not going to fill the entire width, so we're going to set a width to that, and that width is going to be just 120.dp. okay, because now it's sharing the parent width with this other text field for the phone number. So we can cut that out and place that under here. So now we have this, we need to set it up right. So this one is going to say, we'll say if country.dial code like this is not null, then we should return, so we can now set this up as a string. So we can add this and we say country.dial code like this. Let's don't forget to add a plus. So else we should return plus or minus, which is the beginning of the dial code. So now down here, our icon URL is still the same. This is the same, but this is going to say the placeholder now is going to say plus or minus because nothing was returned. So that's done now. So but let's add a little spacer between these two so that they don't look squashed up. So modifier, use modifier dot width, and we set that to 12.dp like this. We need to missed I here. Okay, so now here we're going to have, we want this to also fill the remaining space that is left by the dial code. So modifier dot weight, and we set that to 1F. So the value is still the same, on value change is still the same, this still says phone number, and the condition for the error is still the same, and every other thing is the same. So now if we run our app, we'll possibly be able to pick a country, but let's try that out and find out for ourselves. Okay, we have a runner here, no value passed for the parameter countries repository, which is my fault. So here in our view model, let's add this, let's add another get here because we added another repository there. So we can add that here, copy this and put that here. This is going to be countries repository, and this is going to be countries repository implementation as well. So with that, so we can pass our get here, not this one, to get the API. So let's give that another run and see if that have been fixed. We have another error again, no value for parameter country here. Where? Oh, okay. In our profile form. See, these are some of the things that we've missed out in our profile screen. We need to pass our country again. First of all, let's check. So we're going to pass country and say screen state dot country. Did we create screen state of country? Then on country select, we should set the condition to open and close our dialog box. So here we need to create the state first of all. Here under here we should collect the state of our country and say var country states, and we call our profile view model dot country states that we created in there. Then we can now create another variable that is going to be a var to check if our dialog is open or not. So, and we say by remember, and that's going to be mutable state of, we pass false, so it's always closed until it's opened, it's clicked to open. Okay, so that's now done. So now inside our screen ready, before inside our scaffold in the column, we are going to add set that condition down here, and we'll say if country dialog open is true, then we say country state dot display result. So we say country states dot display results, and in that display result, as we know, we should add our loading so that we can show the user that something is loading, and we'll call our loading card, pass our modifier dot fill max size like this. Then outside of our loading, we have on success, and on success we give that success a lambda and a name, and we'll call that countries like this. Then we can now call our country picker dialog from here. Then that doesn't need a body, so we can implement the remaining values, and the countries is going to be our countries, and the selected country should be the screen state dot country like this. Then on dismiss, we should use a lambda and say, and change, once a country is selected, we say our country dialog open, and we reverse that to false. Okay, so then here on the confirm click, we use a lambda again, give that a name and say selected country, because we've selected a country, and confirm that. And here we'll call our profile view model dot update country. Did we create that function? No, we didn't create that function. So we need to go back to our view model and create that function for our country, because we did not. Down here we have phone number, we don't have country. So these are some of the updates that we'll be needing. So under here, let's create a function that we'll call update country, and we'll call value, and the value is going to be of type country like this. So, and you know, this is only going to be called when the user selects a country from the dialog. So we'll say screen state, and we'll assign that to screen state dot copy, and we call country, and we set it to value. Then we call our phone number, and we'll call screen state dot phone number, and we'll pass that and say copy. So here we call our dial code, which will come from the selected country dot dial code, or we can return phone number, and we pass our dial code, and we pass the value dot dial code. Then number, we'll pass our screen state dot phone number and dot number like this, or we can also return an empty string just like that. So let's go back to, I think here, yeah. So now we have update country function here. So what we need to do now is we just pass the selected country here as the value. Then we now change the state of the country dialog open again to false, because we've selected, we need to close that down because we've selected a country. So now that we have that condition here, we can now come down here and say, we can now come down, use a lambda and say country dialog open, and we'll assign that to true because that's the only time it's true, when the user clicks our profile form. Okay, so that was a long one. Then let's test that out again. Okay, our app launched successfully. It seems like we've got everything right this time, and let's go and check that out. Then we'll have a crash. That means we didn't get everything right, unfortunately. So what is happening here? Say could not create instance for singleton country repository. Okay, so I think it has something to do with our UI. Oh, feature profile screen .profile screen could not create instance of feature profile view model. Okay, let's check up our DI. Why doesn't it see the retrofit? We've imported this before. Is there any updates? No. Okay, change this to 5.2. Let's sync that. I don't know why that's happening there, but let's find out. Okay, that error is gone now. Let's make sure every other thing looks fine. Okay, we need to create an instance of the REST API as well. So here is going to be a type of RESTCountries API like this. Then we now pass to get retrofit and .create. We call RESTCountries API, and we pass the class .java like this. Guess that's the reason why it can't create that instance before. So let's give this another quick spin. Okay, before I check that out, let me cut this. I want this to be a little bit separated so I can see them clearly. Yeah, so that's moment of truth again. All right, so now we have, yeah, but this doesn't look right, does it? No. So now if we select this, no dial code found, and there's a typo here, cancel confirm. So there is no country coming up. Why is that? All right, so let's fix this before we find out why that did not come up well. So now it's not showing. If you click on that now, it's not showing anything. So let's cancel, and this is not showing our placeholder either. So what we do in that regard is to go back to the burger selectors field. We inside this if else, we can add another else statement here, and we can copy this text and add that there as a permanent placeholder. So this is going to be just our placeholder, and the font size is still regular, the content, color, the mouse line, everything. So let's check if that is fixed. Then before we now check why we don't have any data from our API yet. Okay, yeah, that looks better. That looks a lot better. So we don't have any data coming from the API. Let's check. I'm not calling package name, this same old error. Okay, all right, this is a very sticky one. Let me check this out and I'll get back to you. So I've seen why our application was not returning any data. As you can see, if we run it again, you will see it says dial code not found, and everything seems to look fine. But I've seen the issue, which is that inadvertently I added spaces to the fields that we are calling here. So if we go back to the API, REST API, so you say filter response, you can filter the output of your requests, include only the specified fields. So when you are passing the fields, like we'll pass the field as a string there, we're not supposed to add spaces to each of the fields that we're selecting, which is exactly what I did here, and that is why we're not having any response. So if we close up that, you will discover that we're going to rerun this app now. So you see, now we have the data called up from the API. So that was giving us a bad response initially, and that's why. So every other part of our implementation still works fine. And also in the profile screen, you know, we were opening this dialog, country picker dialog with using our display results. So we did not add this on error, which I added. So do well to add that in your own code if you're following along. So this is, and so now let's select a country here like American Samoa, and if we confirm that, we're going to populate that space. So but there's something else I noticed here. Our color here for the selector is not the same with our confirm button, which we can quickly fix so that we have that element of uniformity. So the confirm is the content color is test brand. So in our selector here, our selector box, the background color is surface brand. So we are going to change this to, what did we call it here before? This is test brand. So if we go to our resources, our color, this is brown. So the surface brown is supposed to be brown yellow. So I think I messed that up. Yeah. So now if we go back to our country picker dialog and we relaunch our app, we should have some level of uniformity there. So let's check that out. So if we select Albania, for instance, so that looks more uniform. So it depends. If you want to use the brown for both of them, then it's your choice, but I think this looks okay. So if we confirm that, let's try to update. So let's undock this again, make it floatable window, and let's go back. Let's minimize that and open this up and check our database and see if our country will also be updated at the same time. So here we can type anything and type anything here. And our address, we can also type anything. Then the phone number, we can also add some numbers, and let's click update. So that actually updated. So you see the phone number, the country code was added to the phone number field. So this is coming as a map, as we said earlier, and the country is still null. The country was not updated, which is somehow weird. So that means we have not implemented to update customer and read our customer flow. The country in our customer flow. So let's have a quick look at that before we wrap up this section. So let's go back to our customer repo implementation. Yeah, I think that's the place. So we have our country map here, and this is update customer. Yes, okay. So we've mapped out our country here, and it's here. So that should actually work. And we've also mapped the country here. So we need to find out why this doesn't work as well. Okay, that I found out the reason why. So we've implemented the mapping here, so you should add that to your code if you haven't done that for this read customer flow. So we have mapped our country here and we've passed that down here, and in our update customer we've also mapped our country here and we've passed that down here, which is amazing. So the next place is that we need to also do the same in our profile view model for that to be called from our UI once our UI updates. Okay, so let's quickly take care of that. So down here we have done the update country here, and that is good. So up here now we need to use this dial here like this and create another variable that we're going to call mapped country, and we'll assign that to say if dial that we've created above is not equal to null and the country's dot is not empty, that means we have data passed, then we should say countries dot first or null. We should return the first country, then use a lambda and say it dot dial code, and we is equal to dial that we've created up there. So now, or else, if nothing, then we should return screen state dot country. So that means maybe it's been updated before, or if we have any country in our database already. So what we do now here is to come down here and call our country and pass the map country like this. So with that, I believe we're good to go. So in our update country, we need to add anything? Yes, of course. So we need to now pass our country in our update country down here as well. So we'll create another variable that we'll call persisted. So we call that persisted country like this. Then in the persisted country, we assign that to our screen state dot country, which is nullable.let, and in the body here we're going to call our country and pass the data. So now the name is going to be it.name, and the code now is going to be it.code, and the dial code is going to be it.dial code, and finally we have our flag URL, which is going to be it.flag URL. So that is the way we'll map our country to update. Then down here we'll say country and we'll pass persisted country like this. So with this, let's give this a quick spin and see if we can now update our country. So our app have successfully launched. So now what we do next is to go open this up. I think I should have minimized this, then open this up and open this. So now we have updated every other section apart from our country. So let's look out for that. So now we have chosen Albania and we confirm that. So now we can now update. So now you see our country updated with the country code, the dial code, the flag URL, and the name of the country, which is Albania. So that's everything is working with our country selector, and we are happy to move on to the next stage, which is the part 3 of this episode 4, which is now to implement the photo editor to be able to change this and update that on our Firebase storage. So we'll start on that next. Okay, so go grab a drink and come back as usual. Let's continue.